You work for him, so keep quiet unless somebody asks you a question. The HOA president said that to the black arborist beside me, then swept her hand toward my remaining furs like she owned them. 6 others were lying in sections behind us. Her crew had cut them while I was gone for 48 hours, because several HOA homeowners wanted a wider valley view. Now she stood on my property in a bright fuchsia suit and gave me 10 days to remove the rest or face daily fines. I asked one question. Who authorized the cutting? She smiled. The association did. I photographed the stumps, called a surveyor, and started pulling county records. That was when we found a recorded document tied to that exact tree corridor. And once I saw whose signature was on it, I knew those 6 stumps had become a much bigger problem than she understood. My name is Silas Keene. I'm 46, and for most of my adult life, I made a living around trees. Not landscaping. Trees. I ran a small arborist company outside Salem for almost 17 years. Storm cleanup hazard assessment removals nobody wanted to do. Preservation work nobody noticed until it was too late. Eventually, I sold the company, kept my certifications current, and decided I wanted fewer employees, fewer insurance renewals, and a little more quiet. That's how I ended up on 28.6 acres outside Silverton, Oregon. The place wasn't fancy. There was an old workshop with a corrugated roof, a gravel drive, a few open acres, and a western slope covered in mature Douglas fir. Some of those trees had been standing since before paved roads reached that part of the county. On wet mornings, the whole slope smelled like resin and cold earth. The duff underfoot had that soft, springy feel that makes you walk quieter without meaning to. Rain collected on the lower boughs and dropped in fat little taps long after the sky had cleared. And when the wind came up from the valley, the fir tops moved before you could feel the air on your face. My father, Emmett, would have liked the place. He'd been gone 8 years by then. He was the one who taught me that a mature tree is not a tall piece of lumber waiting for instructions. It's shade drainage habitat, soil stability, wind protection, and time. Mostly time. The first winter I owned the land, I spent more hours clearing blackberry and fixing culverts than doing anything picturesque. I usually wore the same red and black flannel over a gray t-shirt, because blackberry thorns don't care what you paid for your clothes. Up the hill from me sat Alder Ridge Estates, an 80-home subdivision with wide driveways, stone mailboxes, and the kind of entry monument that probably had its own maintenance budget. I wasn't part of it. My parcel predated the subdivision. Separate deed. Separate tax lot. No HOA declaration attached to my title. That distinction seemed obvious to me. It was less obvious to Blythe Caraway. Blythe was 54, bright blonde, polished, and always dressed like she expected a photographer to appear without warning. The first time she came down my drive, she was wearing a fuchsia pantsuit, pink heels that had no business on wet gravel, and a gold necklace that stayed perfectly centered, while she explained that my trees were interfering with Alder Ridge's protected western view experience. I asked what that meant. It means your vegetation has become non-compliant. I actually looked over my shoulder, because for half a second I thought she might be talking to somebody who belonged to her HOA. A week later I received a formal notice, 10 days to remove selected trees. After that, $250 per day in what the letter called a non-compliance assessment. I wrote back with 3 sentences. My parcel is not within Alder Ridge Estates. I have not agreed to your covenants. Please provide the recorded instrument giving the association authority over vegetation on my land. Blythe called the next morning. The developer maps establish a community view corridor, she said. Great. Send me the recorded document. She didn't. 2 weeks later, I left for a 2-day equipment safety course near Eugene. When I came home, I knew something was wrong before I reached the house. Fresh-cut Douglas fir has a sharp, sweet smell you can pick up from a distance if you've spent enough years around saws. Then I saw the sawdust, pale yellow against the wet ground. Then the stumps, 6 of them. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds listening to water drip from branches that were still standing. Then I called Isaiah Reddick, a consulting arborist I trusted, and Tamsin Rowe, a licensed surveyor. I did not call Blythe. Not yet. Tamsin arrived the next morning with a survey-grade receiver, a tripod, and the particular expression surveyors get when somebody has moved something they shouldn't have moved. Isaiah came 20 minutes later in work boots and a rain shell, carrying diameter tape, a sounding mallet, and a tablet. We started with the boundary. My deed referenced iron pins set during a 1998 partition survey. 2 were still where the plat said they should be. Tamsin used those control points to re-establish the line, then walked the cut area with me. At the deepest point, the contractor had crossed 57 feet onto my parcel. Not 5 feet. Not a mower blade over the line. 57. Every one of the 6 stumps was on my side. Isaiah worked tree by tree. 39 inches diameter at breast height. 43, 46, 48, 50, 51. He checked decay pockets, root flare evidence of fungal fruiting bodies, old storm damage. He took increment samples where appropriate and estimated the trees at roughly 106 to 132 years old. These weren't emergency removals, he said. That mattered. A dangerous tree can create a very different argument from a healthy tree somebody wants out of the way. If Blythe was going to claim safety later, I wanted the physical condition documented before rain cleanup crews or selective memory could change the picture. Around noon, a courier came down my driveway. He handed me an envelope from Alder Ridge. Inside was my first assessment statement. $250 for the first day of continued vegetation noncompliance, plus a $600 administrative enforcement charge. I read it while standing beside 6 trees their contractor had already cut. There are moments when sarcasm feels less like a personality trait and more like basic maintenance. I called my attorney Corinne Vale, a property lawyer in Salem I had used once during the purchase. "Do not pay it," she said after I forwarded the notice. "Do not argue the facts on the phone either." That afternoon we sent a written demand to Alder Ridge. Cease entry. Preserve all records. Do not alter the stumps. Do not remove timber. Produce the authority under which the association believed it could enter my property. Tamsin attached a preliminary boundary exhibit. Isaiah attached field photographs. Then I called the tree contractor listed on a scrap of fluorescent marking ribbon I found near the old logging spur. The company owner, Garrick Sloan, sounded cautious but not hostile. "We were told that corridor belonged to the association," he said. "Who told you?" "The work packet came from their office." "Did anybody show you my deed?" "No." "Did anybody get my permission?" A pause. "We were told permission was handled." That phrase stayed with me. Permission was handled. It's amazing how much trouble can hide inside 3 passive words. Garrick agreed to send the work order after Corinne made a formal request. It arrived the following afternoon. The first page listed equipment crew size access route and estimated labor. The second page had a project description. I read it twice. Restore premium western view corridor before fall listing season. Not hazard removal. Not storm mitigation. Not fire prevention. View restoration. Below that was the authorization line. Approved by Blythe Caraway President, Alder Ridge Estates Association. Isaiah was in my workshop when I showed him. He leaned against the workbench and let out a low whistle. Some would put the motive in writing for you. Apparently customer service is still alive. He didn't laugh much, but I got half a smile. Over the next 2 days, he built a formal condition and valuation file. He explained something homeowners often miss when trees are damaged. The board foot value of the wood is not necessarily the value of the tree in place. A mature tree can affect screening slope protection habitat, wind load landscape contribution, and restoration cost. You don't price a 100-year-old fir the way you price a stack of 2x6s at a lumber yard. The takeaway was simple. When property damage happens, document the condition before anybody gets a chance to redefine what happened. Blythe came back Friday. She parked just outside the marked line and walked toward us in another fuchsia jacket, gold earrings catching the gray light. Isaiah was kneeling beside one of the larger stumps. She looked at him, then at me. "Is your tree man still doing this?" Isaiah stood. "I'm a consulting arborist." She gave him the kind of smile people use when they've decided credentials are inconvenient. "I'm speaking with the owner." That was when I understood something useful. Blythe did not think she had made a mistake. She thought the paperwork would eventually make her right. And people who believe that tend to leave a lot of paperwork behind. The paperwork arrived Monday, although not the paperwork I had asked for. Alder Ridge's attorney sent Corinne a 7-page letter arguing that the association possessed what he called legacy view rights, retained through the original development scheme. That phrase sounded impressive. It also sounded carefully designed to avoid saying easement. Corinne read it once and called me. They're describing a right, she said. They are not identifying the recorded document that creates it. So we stop asking them what exists and start checking what actually exists. That was more my speed. We ordered a full title report on my parcel. I pulled the current deed, the older partition deeds, the subdivision plat for Alder Ridge, the recorded HOA declaration, amendments, annexations, and every easement indexed against my tax lot. Nothing gave Alder Ridge control over my trees. Nothing placed my parcel inside its declaration. Nothing created a current view easement across the western slope. That should have ended the argument. Instead, it made Blythe more creative. The next morning, I found 2 of Tamsin's fluorescent survey stakes lying in the ditch. One had been snapped near the base. 3 days after that, a mature fir north of the cut area showed up with a bright orange stripe at chest height. I stood there, looking at that stripe, while rain ticked against my flannel sleeve. Nobody on my side had marked that tree. I called Tamsin. Can survey pins walk out only when they get elected to an HOA board? That was the first joke I'd heard her make. I decided not to give whoever was doing it a second chance without an audience. I posted legal no trespassing signs along the old logging spur and the western approach. I mounted 2 cellular trail cameras where they covered the easiest vehicle access, and a third, higher on the slope, where it could see the remaining tree line. I added motion lights near the workshop and numbered tags to the most exposed firs. Nothing dramatic. No booby traps, no confrontation. Just timestamps. Corinne liked that. If they come back, we want evidence, not a wrestling match in the mud. A few days later, an Alder Ridge homeowner named Orrin Voss called me. I knew him only by sight. He lived 3 houses down from the ridge overlook. I probably shouldn't be doing this, he said. That's a promising opening. He emailed me a screenshot from an HOA board packet. At the top was a project heading, Project Horizon. Below it was a budget line for $18,400. Vegetation clearing, equipment access, view corridor restoration. The board vote was 4-1, and the vote date was almost 3 months before Blythe ever sent me my 10-day notice. I stared at that date longer than I stared at the dollar amount, because it changed the order of events. Blythe had presented the notice as the beginning of an enforcement process. Comply or the association would take action. But the board had already approved the action. They had already set aside money. They had already named the project. My compliance period had been theater. Corinne asked Orrin whether the packet showed attachments. He sent a second image. There was a small map, low resolution, with a shaded band drawn through the tree line. No survey stamp, no recording number, no title reference. Just a colored band. It looks like something made for a meeting, Tamsin said when she saw it, not something created to establish a legal boundary. That distinction matters more than people think. A board packet can show what a board believed, planned, or wanted. It does not automatically create rights against somebody else's land. The takeaway was simple. A threatening letter matters less than the record showing when the decision was actually made. Blythe, meanwhile, doubled down. She sent me a second assessment statement and copied 3 board members. The daily charge had now reached $1,000, not counting the original administrative fee. At the bottom, she added a handwritten note. Still avoidable if you cooperate. I scanned it. Then I put it in a folder. By then, I had started keeping everything in chronological order. Notices, envelopes, emails, camera images, survey work, contractor documents, phone logs. I named the digital folders by date and backed them up off-site. It wasn't glamorous, but neither is a fire extinguisher until something catches. The question I still couldn't answer was the important one. If Alder Ridge had approved $18,400 for Project Horizon months before contacting me, what document had convinced them they were allowed to spend it? Blythe kept referring to the developer. So Corinne and I went looking for the developer's actual record. The first thing Alder Ridge did after we started asking for archived development records was threaten a lien. The notice came by certified mail. Notice of intent to lien for unpaid association assessments. I read the heading twice because my land was not in the association, and there is a special kind of confidence required to threaten a lien against somebody who has never owed you dues. Corinne's response was short. Identify the covenant that creates assessment authority over Silas Keene's parcel. Withdraw the notice if no such covenant exists. Preserve all records relating to the issuance of the notice. No speech, no outrage. Just 3 doors, all of them leading back to documentation. Blythe didn't withdraw it. Instead, Alder Ridge changed the subject. 2 days later, County Land Use Officer Maren Holt called me about a complaint filed against my property. According to the complaint, the remaining firs posed a public safety threat because of disease, wildfire exposure, and probable structural instability. I asked who filed it. Alder Ridge Estates Association. Of course. Maren scheduled an inspection for the following week. Isaiah was there when she arrived. So was I. The morning was cold enough that our breath showed when we talked. The bark on the firs was dark from overnight rain, and every time Isaiah tapped a trunk with his sounding mallet, the knot carried through the stand like someone closing a heavy wooden door. He showed Maren the 6 stumps first. No pre-removal hazard tags. No decay photographs. No arborist report. No evidence that the trees had been condemned before cutting. Then he walked her through the remaining stand. There were normal defects here and there. Dead limbs, one old lightning scar, a small pocket of laminated root rot well uphill from the cut corridor. Nothing supported the claim that the whole line represented an emergency. Maren took notes. Did the association submit a hazard removal application before the work, I asked? Not that I've found. Any firebreak approval? No. Any county authorization for work on this tract? She shook her head. Then she crouched beside one of Tamshin's replacement stakes and unfolded an older subdivision map on the hood of her county vehicle. I want to check something, she said. There was a narrow hatched strip running along the lower western edge of the original Alder Ridge development. It did not look like the shaded band from Project Horizon. It looked older, surveyed, deliberate. In the legend, the symbol was abbreviated VRA. Maren traced it with one finger. This may mean Vegetation Retention Area. The scan sheet references an approval packet we don't have in the field file. If it exists, it'll be in archives. That was the first moment I felt the case shift under my feet. Not because we had proof yet. Because Blythe had spent weeks invoking the developer, and the developer's own map appeared to contain a label about keeping vegetation. Maren requested the archived planning file before she left. That night, one of my cameras sent an alert at 2:13 a.m. I was awake because people in property disputes develop strange relationships with notification sounds. The image showed a man in an Alder Ridge maintenance jacket, crossing the old logging spur. The next image showed him bending beside Tamshin's stake. The third showed the stake in his hand. He removed 2 of them, walked toward the stumps, took several phone pictures, then disappeared back up the trail. I did not drive out there. I did not call him. I saved the original files, exported copies, and emailed the sequence to Karen and Tamsin before I went back to bed. By breakfast, Karen had added it to the preservation record. Do we send it to Blythe? I asked. Not yet. That answer surprised me. She explained that evidence is often more useful before the other side knows exactly what you have. If they continued making factual claims that the footage contradicted those claims, would become part of the record too. So we waited. The next break came from the only Alder Ridge director who had voted against Project Horizon. Her name was Vesper Dane. She would not meet me, but she sent Karen an email from a personal account. In the message, she said Blythe had repeatedly assured the board that the county already knows about the project. Maren checked. No application. No pre-work inspection. No permit file. No verbal approval logged under the parcel or the subdivision. Nothing. The county complaint calling my trees dangerous had been filed only after the contractor cut the first 6. That sequence mattered. First, spend money to open views. Then, when challenged, call the trees hazardous. The takeaway was simple when someone changes the reason for an action. Compare the news story to the oldest dated record you can find. Friday afternoon, Maren called. I found the original approval packet. I put down the coffee I was holding. And there was a pause. You're going to want a certified copy of this. The certified copy arrived in Karen's office the following Tuesday. The document was 19 years old. Across the top, in county recording type, it read, Native Vegetation Conservation Covenant. Attached to it was a map. Tamshin laid a transparency of my current survey over the recorded exhibit. The lines matched so closely that for a moment nobody said anything. The protected tract covered about 9.1 acres along the western slope. My tree corridor. The covenant restricted removal of mature native conifers except for 4 reasons: certified hazard documented disease management, an approved fire break, or county-authorized conservation work. A wider sunset view was not on the list. Neither was fall listing season. Then Marin showed us the part that made the whole thing stranger. The covenant had not been some optional environmental promise the developer made because it sounded nice in a brochure. It was tied directly to Alder Ridge's original land use approval. The developer wanted additional lots along the ridge. The county approved that density on the condition that the lower tree buffer remain in place for slope protection habitat and visual screening. 11 of the homes now complaining about blocked views existed because the developer had agreed to preserve the exact trees they wanted removed. I read that section 3 times. Corinne leaned back in her chair. So the association's theory is that developer history gives them authority. Right. And developer history says the opposite. Right. Tamsin pointed to a paragraph near the end. It got worse for Alder Ridge. The recorded disclosure stated that purchasers of ridge lots were not guaranteed unobstructed views through the protected tract. Not implied. Not buried in some informal meeting note. Recorded. Blythe had been telling homeowners the trees violated a legacy view corridor. The actual legacy document said the corridor was to remain vegetated. There are discoveries that make you want to call the other side immediately. This was not one of them. This was the kind you copy 3 times and store in different places. Isaiah finished his preliminary valuation that same week. He calculated tree condition size, site contribution, restoration work, soil repair monitoring, and the cost of establishing a replacement stand that would still be young long after I was gone. His preliminary exposure estimate crossed $200,000. That did not mean a court would automatically award that number. Corinne was careful about that. Valuation is evidence, not a magic invoice. But it meant Blythe's $18,400 view project had created a problem an order of magnitude larger than the board had budgeted for. I drove home with the certified covenant and a document case on the passenger seat. The evening light was coming through the remaining firs in long bands, and the 6 fresh openings looked harsher than they had a week earlier. I still wasn't thinking about winning. 6 trees were gone. No document could stand them back up. But the power dynamic had changed. Until that day, Alder Ridge had been treating me like a man refusing to follow their rules. Now I had the rule their own developer had signed. I called Corinne from the workshop. How do we make them explain this in public? She was quiet for a second. County enforcement hearing. Good. Silas, that means we don't show them everything yet. I looked at the covenant again. That's fine. Because for the first time since I came home to those stumps, I wasn't wondering what Blythe would do next. I was wondering what she would say after we let her commit to her version first. Once the county set the enforcement hearing, we stopped treating the case like a pile of angry letters and started treating it like a job site. Everybody had a role. Tamsin rebuilt the boundary exhibit in a format a hearing officer could understand in 10 seconds. Current parcel line in 1 layer, contractor access route in another. 6 stump locations numbered 1 through 6. Then the recorded conservation covenant laid over the whole thing. No dramatic arrows, no giant red circles, just geometry. Isaiah finished the biological side. Species, diameter, condition, estimated age, site function, restoration requirements. He documented the remaining stand too, because once people have already crossed a line, you do not assume they have suddenly developed restraint. We tagged 27 mature firs that were most exposed along the corridor. Each tag had a number. Each number had photographs. Each photograph had a date, location, and condition note. I added a 3rd cellular camera and moved the others so their fields of view overlapped. One watched the logging spur. One watched the lower slope. One watched the gate I installed across the private access track. The gate was not a trap. It was a question made out of steel. If you had lawful authority, you could explain it before coming through. If you did not, the closed gate gave you a chance to reconsider. I also added motion lights near the workshop and replaced the 2 survey stakes that had disappeared. Tamsin marked the new ones discreetly enough that removing them would tell us more about the remover than the boundary. Corinne handled the paper side. She sent a formal litigation hold notice to Alderidge and its management company. Emails, text messages, board packets, contractor instructions, accounting records, photographs, internal messages about the cut corridor, everything related to Project Horizon. She sent parallel notices to the HOA's liability carrier and to Garrick Sloan's contractor insurer. That got attention. An HOA president can ignore a homeowner. Insurance companies are harder to impress with posture. They ask boring questions such as who authorized the work, what document granted access, whether the board knew the land belonged to someone else, and why the project description said Premium Western View Corridor if the public explanation had become safety hazard. Boring questions are dangerous when the answers matter. Corinne explained the strategy to me in plain English. Preserve first, price later. That was the takeaway. Preserve the evidence before arguing about the price of the damage. Isaiah had his own version. He spread 2 valuation sheets across my workbench and pointed to the difference between timber value and in-place landscape value. You can buy a young fir, he said. You cannot buy 120 years. His report included site stabilization, replanting, invasive control irrigation support during establishment monitoring, and the likely loss of screening and habitat while the replacement stand matured. The takeaway was just as simple. The cost of destroying something mature can be very different from the price of buying a replacement. Then Vesper Dane sent us the rest of the board packet. She had saved a complete copy before Alderidge's management portal was updated. Project Horizon had not been a one-line budget item. There were notes. Blythe had pushed for the clearing before 2 ridge homes were listed for sale. One note referenced protecting perceived premium view value. Another discussed complaints from owners who believed they had paid for views they were no longer getting. That was useful. But the most useful thing was restraint. Corinne would not let me publish any of it. No neighborhood Facebook post. No angry email blast. No photograph of the covenant with a clever caption. Nothing. Why give them a rehearsal, she said. So we built the presentation in the order we wanted the hearing to unfold. First, let Blythe state Alderidge's position. Then the boundary. Then the tree condition. Then the recorded covenant. Then the Project Horizon timeline. Then, if necessary, the 2:13 a.m. camera footage. We held some evidence back because contradiction has more weight when it follows a confident statement. Meanwhile, I kept working. I repaired a drainage swale near the shop. Sharpened saw chains, rebuilt one section of fence. Normal things. That helped. Anger burns energy and makes you feel productive while accomplishing almost nothing. Measuring, labeling, copying, and fixing things gave the energy somewhere useful to go. A week before the hearing, Marin confirmed the county would conduct a final site inspection first. She also told us the covenant appeared enforceable as a condition of the subdivision approval, though county council would make the formal determination. That was enough. By then, I knew what I wanted from the hearing. I did not need Blythe to apologize. I did not need her embarrassed. I needed the record to become impossible to blur. Because once the facts were fixed in public, every insurance adjuster board member, homeowner, contractor, and county official would be looking at the same 6 stumps. And Blythe would have to explain why they were there. The first sign that Blythe understood the covenant was a community-wide email. Orrin forwarded it to me at 6:42 the next morning. The subject line was misinformation regarding Western Slope maintenance. Blythe described the covenant as obsolete developer paperwork being used by an outside landowner to interfere with Alderidge's legitimate safety and property value concerns. Outside landowner. I had to admire the phrase. My land had been there before the subdivision, but somehow I was the outsider in a dispute about people crossing onto it. She also claimed the association had acted in good faith reliance on historic development expectations. Corinne read the email and said, "Save it." That had become one of the least exciting and most profitable phrases in my life. Save it. 2 days later, Alderidge's attorney sent a settlement proposal. $25,000. Confidentiality agreement. Mutual release. And one more item tucked into the middle. I would grant the association a perpetual easement, allowing selective vegetation management inside the western corridor. I read that clause twice. They're offering me $25,000 to give them the right they claimed they already had. Corinne nodded. And to release the claim for the 6 trees. So no. We rejected it without a counteroffer. That same week, Alder Ridge's management company informed Corinne that certain historical Project Horizon emails were unavailable because of a platform migration issue. That was unfortunate timing for them. The litigation hold notice had gone out before the supposed discovery of missing records. The HOA's insurer noticed too. An adjuster named Lena Pike began requesting board minutes, vendor contracts, approval documents, and any communication showing why Alder Ridge believed it had authority over my parcel. Blythe responded by getting louder in public. The insurer responded by getting quieter in writing. I preferred the insurer's method. Then, one of my cameras pinged just after sunrise. 2 men were standing near the lower trail. One was an Alder Ridge maintenance supervisor. The other was a crew lead from Garrick Sloan's company. They carried a measuring wheel and a can of marking paint. They stopped at the posted boundary, looked toward the camera, and backed out without crossing farther. I sent the images to Corinne. By noon, Garrick Sloan himself called her. He wanted his company separated from Alder Ridge's position. That meant documents. Lots of them. His attorney produced the complete job file under an insurer cooperation request. The file included the original 6-tree work order. It also included a second page we had never seen. Phase 2. 11 additional mature firs. Same corridor. Same access route. Same project code. Project Horizon was never supposed to stop at 6. The 6 trees were simply the first stage. There was an internal email attached from Blythe to Garrick's scheduling manager. Complete Phase 1 while owner is away. We'll handle the rest after access is normalized. Corinne called me after reading it. Normalized? That seems to be the word. I assume that means trespassing until it feels routine. Silas. What if I'm not putting that sentence in a filing? Probably wise. But there was more. Another message from Blythe pushed for the second phase before owners start asking questions about timing. That line mattered, because Vesper's board packet already showed concern about the fall listings. The clearing was not a spontaneous safety response. It was scheduled around a sales window. Garrick's company also produced an equipment reservation for the 11-tree phase. A larger chipper, a tracked lift, stump grinding capacity, scheduled for the week after my 10-day compliance deadline expired. In other words, Blythe's notice gave me 10 days to cut the trees myself, while her contractor had already reserved equipment to do it if I refused. That was the mini twist I had not expected. The threat and the contractor schedule were 2 halves of the same plan. The daily fine was pressure. The equipment reservation was intent. The county hearing was now 5 days away. Marin moved the site inspection to the morning of the hearing, so county council could review fresh field notes before the afternoon session. Corinne updated our exhibit list. We still did not send Blythe everything. She knew about the covenant. She knew we had the survey. She did not know we had Phase 2. She did not know we had the full contractor email chain. And unless the maintenance supervisor had told her, she might not know about the 2:13 a.m. footage either. The evening before the inspection, I walked the corridor alone. Mist was settling between the trunks. The 6 openings looked like missing teeth in a line that had once been continuous. I put my hand on the numbered tag of the nearest remaining fir. 27 still standing. 11 had been scheduled to go next. For the first time, the scope of what almost happened felt as real as what already had. Blythe had not lost control because she cut 6 trees. She was losing control because she had assumed nobody would make her document why. The night before the county inspection, I went to bed early. At 6:10 the next morning, my phone buzzed. Camera 3. A white flatbed truck was coming down the old logging spur with a stump grinder behind it. I watched the next image load. Same truck. Then a second vehicle. Then headlights catching the reflective strip on my locked gate. I pulled on boots and walked out with coffee in one hand and my phone in the other. The morning was still half dark. Low mist sat between the trunks. Diesel idled on the far side of the gate, with that heavy, oily rattle you feel in your chest before you really hear it. I stayed on my side. The grinder operator climbed out and looked at the lock. Alder Ridge's maintenance supervisor got out of the second vehicle. He saw me and raised both hands. "We have a work order." "I'm sure you do. We need access to remove hazardous remnants. The gate stays closed." He started to say something about association authority. I was already calling the sheriff's non-emergency line for a civil standby. Then I called Marin. She was 20 minutes away. By the time the deputy arrived, Blythe was there too. She stepped out of her SUV in a fuchsia suit and pink heels, which sank just enough into the wet shoulder to make the whole outfit look like it had declared war on Oregon. Her bright blonde hair was perfectly arranged. Her mood was not. "This is association-authorized remediation," she told the deputy. "He is obstructing safety work." The deputy looked at the posted sign, the locked gate, and then at me. "Do you consent to them entering?" "No." He turned back to Blythe. "Do you have a court order easement document or other authority allowing access over this parcel today?" "We have a contractor authorization." "That's not what I asked." The grinder operator was paying very close attention now. Marin pulled in behind the deputy a few minutes later. She stepped out carrying a field case and the certified covenant map. Blythe tried again. "These are hazardous stumps. We're cleaning up an existing project." Marin looked through the gate. The 6 stumps were visible from where we stood. Each one had a numbered evidence marker beside it. "Those stumps are part of an active county review," she said. "Nobody alters them today." That sentence changed the contractor's posture instantly. The driver walked to the truck cab, pulled a clipboard, and handed the deputy his work order. "I'm not getting cited over somebody else's property dispute." The work order listed all 6 stump numbers by location. Remove. Grind below grade. Haul residual material. Authorization Blythe Caraway. Date issued the previous afternoon. Karen had warned the association in writing not to alter the stumps. The county had scheduled an inspection, and less than 12 hours before that inspection, Blythe had ordered the physical evidence ground below grade. She called it cleanup. The paperwork called it something else. Garrick Sloan arrived before the equipment left. He had been contacted by his insurer after learning one of his subcontract crews had been dispatched under the new order. He was furious. Not theatrical furious. Contractor furious. The quiet kind where every sentence starts sounding like it may become an exhibit. "I did not approve this dispatch under the original file," he said. Blythe snapped that his company had an ongoing obligation to finish the work. Garrick looked at her. "No, we had a job. You told us you had access." Then he turned to the deputy. "I have the complete file in my truck." That was how the final piece surfaced. An email from Blythe sent before the first cutting. The subject line was Phase 1 access. The message was short. "Do the first 6 while he's gone. We'll handle the rest after." Nobody said anything for several seconds. Even the grinder had been shut off by then, and without the diesel noise, the woods felt unnaturally quiet. Marin took a copy. The deputy documented the work order and renewed the trespass notice with Blythe present. Garrick's lawyer emailed the full job file directly to Karen before 9 o'clock. The inspection continued after the equipment left. Marin photographed every stump, every tagged fir, the gate, the survey markers, and the contractor access route. By 11, County Council had the covenant the site report the work order and Blythe's email. The public hearing was scheduled for 3 that afternoon. I had 5 hours. I went home, changed my muddy jeans, put on a clean pair, and left the red and black flannel. Some battles require a suit. This one had already seen enough costumes. I loaded Tamshin's map, Isaiah's report, the Project Horizon packet, the contractor file, and the certified covenant into the truck. Karen met me in the parking lot outside the county building. "Ready?" "No." "Good answer." We walked inside anyway. The hearing room held maybe 70 people, about 60 more than I wanted. Alder Ridge residents filled the back rows. 2 board members sat with Blythe, and the association's attorney on the left. Garrick Sloan sat behind his lawyer on the right. Marin was near county council. The deputy from that morning stood along the wall. A local reporter had the aisle seat. Blythe looked composed again. Karen had told me not to measure the hearing by facial expressions. Measure it by what enters the record. The hearing officer opened with the county's enforcement notice and asked Alder Ridge to state its position. Their attorney spoke first. Historic development expectations, safety concerns, good faith reliance, confusion over recorded documents. Then Blythe said the association had believed the Western Corridor existed to maintain views for Ridge homeowners, and that the first removals were consistent with community expectations. Karen wrote one word on her pad. Good. Tamsin went first for us. She projected the boundary exhibit. This is Mr. Keene's parcel. Click. This is the recorded Alder Ridge boundary. Click. This is the contractor access route. Click. These are stump locations 1 through 6. All 6 markers sat inside my parcel. The deepest intrusion measured 57 feet. The hearing officer asked whether there was survey uncertainty affecting the stump locations. No, Tamshin said. That one word did more work than 10 minutes of arguing. Isaiah went next. He identified his credentials and described the 6 Douglas firs, their diameters, estimated ages, condition, and the lack of evidence supporting emergency hazard removal. The association attorney asked whether any large tree could fail. Any tree can fail, Isaiah said. That is not the same as documenting that these trees required immediate removal. Then Marin opened the county archive file. Native Vegetation Conservation Covenant. The room got quieter. She walked through the recorded map, the 9.1-acre protected tract, and the limited exceptions for hazard disease management, approved fire break, or authorized conservation work. County Council asked why the covenant existed. Marin turned to the original approval. The applicant requested additional residential density along the ridge. Approval was conditioned in part on permanent retention of the lower native vegetation buffer. A man behind me whispered, "What?" The purchaser disclosure appeared next. No guarantee of unobstructed views through the protected tract. Residents started reading along. Karen then introduced Project Horizon. $18,400. Board vote 4-1. Date nearly 3 months before my compliance notice. Then the contractor description: restore premium Western View corridor before fall listing season. The safety argument got smaller on the screen without anybody needing to say so. Next came Phase 2. 11 additional firs, equipment reservation, scheduled for the week after my 10-day deadline. Then Garrick testified. He said Alder Ridge represented that access had been handled. His company received no deed from me, no permission from me, and no hazard report identifying the 6 trees as emergency removals. His lawyer supplied the full work file. Karen displayed Blythe's email. Do the first 6 while he's gone. We'll handle the rest after. The room simply stopped. Blythe leaned toward her microphone. That is being taken completely out of context. The hearing officer looked at her. What context would change the property ownership reflected on the survey? She started talking about community expectations. Karen let her finish. Then she introduced the 2:13 a.m. camera sequence, showing the maintenance supervisor removing survey stakes. Finally, Marin produced the stump grinding work order from that morning. 6 evidence stumps, issued after the preservation demand. Issued before county inspection. Signed by Blythe. The hearing officer asked why the stumps were going to be ground. Cleanup, Marin answered. They were material evidence in an active enforcement review. County Council summarized the findings. Unauthorized entry. Removal within the protected tract. No demonstrated hazard exception. No county authorization. Planned additional cutting. Attempted alteration of the cut sites after notice of dispute. The county issued an immediate stop work order and required a professionally prepared restoration plan. Alder Ridge was prohibited from entering my parcel for vegetation work without documented lawful authority. The deputy recorded the renewed no trespass instruction in front of the board. Then a resident called from the back. Why were we never shown the covenant? Another said, we paid 18 grand for this. The hearing officer called for order. Blythe looked toward the covenant map still glowing on the screen. That was the only moment I spoke directly to her. You kept calling it a view corridor, I said. The county called it a conservation corridor 19 years before I bought it. Karen touched my sleeve. Enough. She was right. The record had already said everything else. The county order did not make the 6 trees come back. That part mattered more after the hearing than during it. Public vindication is loud for about an hour. Then you drive home, pull into the same gravel lane and see the same openings in the tree line. Still, the consequences came quickly. Alder Ridge withdrew every assessment, including the $250 daily charge and the lien threat. Its attorney sent a written acknowledgement that my parcel was outside association jurisdiction and that Alder Ridge claimed no right to enter it for vegetation work. The insurer took over most communication after that. So did the homeowners. Within 2 weeks, enough residents signed a petition to force a special board meeting. Project Horizon was no longer a phrase in a private packet. It was something every homeowner could ask about. Why had $18,400 been approved? Why had the board been told the county knew? Why did Phase 2 target 11 more trees? Why had the association threatened fines against land it did not govern? Blythe resigned as president before the recall vote. 2 directors who had supported Project Horizon left the board over the next few months. I did not attend the meeting where Blythe resigned. By then, I had heard enough speeches. The civil claim took longer. Karen worked with the HOA's liability carrier, Garrick's insurer, and our experts. We documented restoration cost, site repair, professional monitoring, the mature tree loss, and the facts around authorization. Eventually, the claims resolved for a combined $238,000. No confidentiality clause, no view easement, no future cutting rights. Alder Ridge also had to fund the county-approved restoration required by the enforcement order. That plan interested me more than the settlement check. We stabilized disturbed soil, removed invasives exploiting the new light, planted native fir stock, and set a multi-year monitoring schedule. The 6 big stumps stayed. Some became nurse logs and habitat instead of being ground into mulch. Isaiah cut me one thin cross-section from a damaged upper section that was legally salvaged. The growth rings were tight in places, wide in others. Fire years, wet years, dry years. More than a century recorded in wood. I mounted it in the workshop, not as a trophy. More like a clock. The 27 mature firs we tagged were still standing. That was the number I cared about most. Alder Ridge's new board adopted a policy requiring recorded authority and legal review before association-funded work could occur outside association property. They also added written notice requirements near neighboring parcels. Oren told me meetings got shorter after that. Apparently asking, do we actually own this, saves time. I kept working on the property. Drainage, fences, deadwood, ordinary things. The western slope will not look the same in my lifetime. A planted tree can be healthy and beautiful and still be younger than the loss beside it. So I put $25,000 from the settlement into a small annual scholarship fund for students in local community college forestry and arboriculture programs. Isaiah helped me set the criteria. The first recipients came out the following spring for a restoration day. We spent Saturday planting, mulching, checking guards, and explaining why some old woody debris was staying exactly where it was. Near lunch, one student asked which tree had started the whole fight. I pointed toward the 6 stumps. Those. He looked at them, then at the ridge houses. All for a view. That was the idea. He shook his head. My father used to say tree work was mostly knowing what to cut. The older I get, the more I think the harder part is knowing what to leave alone. If you've ever had an HOA board neighbor or local committee decide your property was somehow theirs to manage, tell me what happened in the comments. And if you like stories where the paperwork finally catches up with the people waving it around, subscribe. The next one starts with a board that decided a recorded map was merely a suggestion. Now stepping outside Silas Keene's story for a minute, there's one detail I keep coming back to. Not the hearing. Not even the $238,000 settlement. It's those 6 stumps. Because Silas won the argument, the fines disappeared, the board changed, and the remaining trees stayed standing. But those 6 were still gone. That's the part people sometimes skip when a story ends with justice served. Winning can stop the next bad decision. It doesn't always undo the first one. And think about how small this started. A few homeowners wanted a cleaner view. Somebody on a board decided that preference carried more weight than a property line, a recorded covenant, and a man saying no. Then the paperwork kept getting bigger, because nobody wanted to be the first person to admit the original decision was wrong. Have you ever watched something like that happen in your HOA, where a small request turned into a full-blown power fight because one person refused to back down? Tell me about it in the comments. If you got something out of this one, give the video a like, subscribe to HOA Stories, and share it with somebody who has ever opened an envelope from an HOA and thought, they can't possibly mean that. Sometimes, the most expensive thing a board can do is confuse permission with power.